All right, welcome back, everybody. I'm Noah Sawyer, and this is the Junto, episode 33. It is March 24th, a Tuesday in 2026. So today I just want to do some readings. I got a lot of new subscribers in the past 24 hours, and I'm at 399 currently. So if you're not subscribed, you could be the 400th subscriber. And yeah, so if you're checking this out and you aren't familiar with it, the video that attracted a bunch of people to the show, again, I think it kind of gives the gist, but so I'll just say sometimes I do longer monologues on subjects that I'm trying to bring attention to, and other times I'll just do some chill readings. Oh, I left the text on the screen again. This is something I just wanted to have up for after. Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So I mean, I don't know. If you look at any of the videos, you kind of get the idea at this point. Trying to make sense of the specific societal situation that we find ourselves in, the specific biological, physiological, spiritual, existential situation that we each find ourselves in uniquely, but with so many commonalities. So it's just trying to be a place where we take life seriously and try to learn about where we are and how we got here and how to get out. So related to that, I'm going to read 10 more verses from the Tao Te Ching today from various translations. And this is a book from ancient China, and not super well documented who actually wrote it or where it actually came from. But yeah, it is incredible because it is so relevant to our situation today. And I've talked about in the period where I was really depressed, when I refer to that period, I've talked about how important it was to me to develop a vocabulary internally for understanding my personality and other people's personalities to help me overcome anxiety and to discern why I had certain coping mechanisms or where they came from socially in my development, especially my early childhood development. And so I've mentioned that a few times, but I don't think I've really talked about how important this book was to me during that whole period as well. And I specifically had this translation for a long time. And this was kind of near the end of my depression period that I really got turned onto this book. And it came to help me ease, I don't know, it's so general to say ease anxiety, but it did help me understand so many things about the way I was interacting with other people and the way that I was interacting with the world. And there is so much wisdom in this book that it is really unbelievable that we even have access to it. Never mind that it was written so long ago, and that really speaks to the commonality of humans in the human experience. The fact that someone in ancient China wrote these verses, or multiple people wrote these verses, and that these verses can mean so much to us today. So I think that will be apparent over the course of verses 11 to 20. And something I say with this book is if you pick it up and start anywhere random and you read 10 verses, I think there will be something that strikes you and that is relevant to your life in there. And that certainly happens in this collection of 11 to 20. But there's also stuff in there where, I won't have a whole lot to say about it. And yeah, there's stuff that one passes over. It's not all relevant all the time. And some of it may never make sense to us or never be useful to us. So I think I'll just get into it real quick. I'll just describe the translations again. This is published by Vintage, Tao Te Ching, translated by Jia Fufeng and Jane English. And this was the first one I ever got, and I think it is very valuable. It is simple and there's a lot of depth. This book suffers sometimes from translations that are overly simplistic or trying to make them too modern and liberalized in a way. And okay, this other one is a translation from Dr. Isabella Mears, and it was published by William McClellan and Company, printers and publishers in Glasgow, Scotland. And this one is the most recent one, which is the Tao Te Ching translated by Brooke Ziporin. And I don't know who published this one. Live Right Publishing Corporation. So yeah, that's funny. I wonder what else they put out, because that's kind of why I'm reading them today. Is it is very hard to find ways to live today, and there's at least to live healthily, which when I say live, that's really what I mean. To live in a way that is dignified and worthy of how special people really are. So that is not really encouraged, and we kind of have to do a lot of relearning because our culture neglects to help us hone those most important skills to bring virtue into our lives. All right, so I'm going to start just real quick with a verse from, or before I do 11 to 20, I think there's an interesting translation of the first line of the whole book, or the first verse of the whole book in here. So this is a very popular sentence, and Brooke Ziporin translates it in a way that is unorthodox, but I think yields a lot of insight. It's hard to read. It was hard for me to read at first, but upon some reflection, it is very interesting, and it's relevant to the subject of the show. So typically these two lines are rendered as, the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao, and Tao means way. The way that can be told is not the eternal way, the way to live. So the name that can be named is not the eternal name. So the name that you can ascribe, that you can put on something, is not that eternal name. And I think this is evoked well by Brooke in this translation, but it's a little tricky to, I wonder how quickly picked up it will be through the voice, but I want to put it out there for anyone who is interested in this stuff. This is a much more poetic translation. So, any course that can be taken as the right course to take, but no course like that can be the course taken always. Any course can be taken as the right course to take, but no course like that can be the course taken always. So we're getting there from the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. And course is similar to way. That's clearly the word that's translating Tao here. But any course that can be taken as the right course to take, that refers to you ascribing a set of, that's you embarking on trying to do something correctly. That's a course that you are fitting to the circumstances. You're saying, okay, I'm going to do this so that I accomplish this, or so that I move through these circumstances in a particular way. So any course that can be taken as the right course to take, but no course like that. When he says no course like that, he's saying any course that you are fitting to the circumstances. That can't be the course taken always, i.e. the eternal Tao. So no course like that, no course that you are fitting to the circumstances can actually be the Tao. If you are thinking and ascribing those things, it can't actually be the eternal way that applies at all times and brings true peace. So similarly, the second verse, typically it's the name that can be named is not the eternal name. Any name can be named to determine what is or should be. So you can name anything, but no name like that whole category of that type of naming something where you're ascribing it to an entity or a desired circumstance or any concept. No name like that can be what determines them always. So he even drops name there at the end, and he says just what determines them always, because we tend to think of names as things that determine things, like this is a pen, and you would think this is a pen. However, what determines this always has nothing to do with the name pen. It has nothing to do with the concept pen. It has to do with the process through which this plastic came to be melted and molded, and the other plastic, the cap, came to be melted and molded, and the plastic that forms the tube that holds the ink inside came to be, and how the ink was processed and created, and how the metal tip was processed and created. So that is really what determines it in an eternal sense. That's its actual process, philosophy, reality, content. I don't have a great way of describing that concept, but that's sort of what some philosophers get at when they are talking about multiplicity, like the multiplicity that forms this pen in any moment. It's even being determined by my hand because I'm holding it up and I'm moving it around. It is experiencing all the forces of gravity, of my movement, of my clamping it right here and spinning it, and the ends that I'm not even touching is experiencing force. It's experiencing pushing against the air. And that's completely what he's talking about here, is any name that can be named, any name can be named to determine what is or should be. Pardon me if I screw up some words reading these, because I'm so used to saying it one other way. So hopefully I didn't mess up, but he's saying any name can be named to determine what is or should be. You can describe anything, but no name like that, no description can ever determine the eternal essence of what you are trying to get at with your name. So I just want to keep that in mind. I'm not going to do the whole verse, but I think that is just kind of I think that's a very educational translation of that. I think it forces you to take more out of it than just the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. I think it is a good translation. I think it's fair. I think it encapsulates things about the typical line, the typical way that is rendered. But it forces you to go deeper, and it forces you to actually reckon with the reality of what it's talking about and how it applies to your actual everyday life. So props to Brooke. All right. So that said, let's just jump in and let's just head down the line starting from verse 11. And I'd say it's probably 50-50 with like ones that are going to speak to me and ones that are not, maybe less. Maybe it'll be more on the other side. And I'll have perhaps not a whole lot to say, but I know there's a couple that are really good in here, one of which I've already brought up multiple times because it relates so much to our lives. All right, so let me just throw the text up so you know which one I'm on at any time. Verse 11, Tao Te Ching, verse 11, okay. So start with 11. I'm going to read each of these from both of these versions, and then I'll only read the most special ones from Brooke's version. I might only read one from in here because I think it's a lot, they're more poetic and it's a harder ask to listen to that and make sense of it. Like when I go to poetry readings, I don't like going to poetry readings because I just don't think readily like that about poetry. I kind of need to sit with it and take time to move it all around and deconstruct it and figure out what the meaning is. When people read it, it goes by too fast for me. I'm just not poetically minded in that way. So, all right, let's jump in with verse 11 from Jia Fu Feng. 30 spokes share the wheel's hub. It is the center hole that makes it useful. Shape clay into a vessel. It is the space within that makes it useful. Cut doors and windows for a room. It is the holes which make it useful. Therefore, benefit comes from what is there, usefulness from what is not there. And all I'll say about that one is it reminds me of when we read last time, verse 4. And verse 4 is, the Tao is an empty vessel. It is used but never filled. And then there's the rest of it, but it just reminds me of that line. There's a lot of connections to be made all across this book between the verses from lines to lines. There's contradictions, seeming contradictions, direct. Well, I wouldn't call them true contradictions because in the realm of the names, similar to how Brooke is describing it, they are contradictory, but in the realm of reality, they are not. I think it does portray the way. So let's hear 11 from Dr. Isabella Mears. Yes, Dr. Isabella Mears. 30 spokes surround one nave. The usefulness of the wheel is always in that empty innermost. You fashion clay to make a bowl. The usefulness of the bowl is always in that empty innermost. You cut out doors and windows to make a house. Their usefulness to a house is always in their empty space. Therefore, profit comes from external form, but usefulness comes from empty innermost. That is kind of interesting, the final line there, because it's like you do need the material reality around you in order to like move righteously through the world. You can't totally shut the world off. However, you need that empty innermost of mind. You need the rich inner life of mind and stillness of mind. So I'd never thought of it that way. Nice. So let's move on to 12. In the Jiao Fu Feng. Oh yeah, this is the one that I read all the time, so, you know, because this just has so much to do with overstimulation in our society and how overstimulation breeds numbness. It breeds desensitivity. So I'll read it again. The 5 colors blind the eye, the 5 tones deafen the ear, the 5 flavors dull the taste. Racing and hunting madden the mind, precious things lead one astray. Therefore, the sage is guided by what he feels and not by what he sees. He lets go of that and chooses this. So those 5 colors, the multitude of colors, everything on the phone, everything out in the world, the advertisements we see, the billboards we see, the video ads on the subway in New York, which I think is totally inhumane. All of that stuff ultimately blinds your sensitization to connecting the visual world with a rich inner life. It sort of severs a connection there. I think we're all deeply numb to our senses, and this is a beautiful verse for that. And one other thing I want to draw attention to, since I mentioned that I used to like this book for coming out of my depressive spells, waking my mind back up. I remember once when I was very depressed, and and it was not because I had an unrequited crush on a woman, but I did happen to also have an unrequited crush on a woman. So I remember reading this verse, and the racing and hunting madden the mind, precious things lead one astray. That was something I interpreted as my crush at the time. I was like, yeah, this is like some things you can't change, and by worrying about this, am I ever even gonna increase the likelihood that she ever requites my feelings? Like, probably not. So that whenever I read that section of this verse, I think about that person. So anyway, and if you're friends with me, it's almost definitely not who you think it is. So just throwing that out there as well. All right, so in the Isabella Mears, verse 12, the 5 colors blind the eyes of man. The 5 musical notes deafen the ears of man. The 5 flavors dull the taste of man. Violent running and hunting disturb the emotions of man. Greed for rare objects is hurtful to the actions of man. That is why the self-controlled man occupies himself with the unseen. He does not occupy himself with the things visible. He puts away the latter and seeks the former. So the other reason I bring this verse up a lot is not because of 5 representing an inundation with all kinds of color, with multiple types of color, but rather instead of seeing the color for what it is, you start counting the colors as categorical entities, as red, blue, yellow, green. And so 5 colors, I take it to mean you start categorizing the world around you. You start making it abstract through naming, which is where we started here. So that is, and that's especially relevant to this, the eyes of man, thinking of mankind as a whole, because we're in this particularly scientific, myth of progress oriented period, myth of efficiency, or, you know, it's not even a myth. It's sort of like a worship of efficiency for efficiency's sake, economy for economy's sake. And that that plays into that because you're getting away from life, you're getting away from the values of life, and instead reflecting this codified representation of life and worshiping that instead, or seeking that instead. And the ending here pulls that together, because that is why the self-controlled man occupies himself with the unseen. He does not occupy himself with the things visible. He puts away the latter and seeks the former. The things that are visible are information. We're in an our whole society is trying to turn everything into information. That's how AI operates. AI operates on information. And even before that, we were in a highly information-based society after World War II, because information allows you to cybernetically manage processes, whether they be government processes, small organization processes, personal health processes. Doctors become increasingly cybernetized, so totally relevant. And yeah, and I will just read the little note that the author puts here because I think it is cute. So the five, this is in ancient China, the 5 colors are blue, red, yellow, black, and white. The 5 notes of the Chinese musical scale are G, A, B, D, E. The 5 flavors are salt, bitter, sour, acid, and sweet. So, yeah. All right, let's jump into 13. So, Jiao Fufeng puts it as: accept disgrace willingly. Accept misfortune as the human condition. What do you mean by accept disgrace willingly? Accept being unimportant. Do not be concerned with loss or gain. This is called accepting disgrace willingly. What do you mean by accept misfortune as the human condition? Misfortune comes from having a body. Without a body, how could there be misfortune? Surrender yourself humbly, then you can be trusted to care for all things. Love the world as your own self, then you can truly care for all things. I think this is, I didn't really understand this one until today. There were little parts that I would get out of it, but hopefully I can describe it well, because this was an insight that I only just had when I was brushing up on these an hour ago. But finally, I kind of get the misfortune comes from having a body part a little better. So accept disgrace willingly. That one kind of makes sense, or it's described as accept being unimportant. If you accept being unimportant, and that doesn't mean give up on life at all. It just means give up on glory, give up on the concept of fame, and do your work anyway. So, but this accept misfortune as the human condition. Misfortune comes from having a body. Without a body, how could there be misfortune? And I think the thing that you have to understand here is that there's an implicit, it seems like there's an implicit love of the body, or respect for the body. Because it sort of sounds like it's putting down the body. It's like, well, misfortune comes from having a body, just get over it because you have a body. But rather instead, it finishes with love the world as your own self, as your own embodied self. Then you can truly care for all things. So you accept misfortune as you accept having a body, and you don't try to enter into a utopianism or rid yourself of misfortune entirely. You just recognize that it's part of life. So 13 from Isabella Mears here. Oh, this one's, yeah, I like how she did this one. Dread glory as you dread shame. Prize great calamity as you prize your body. What does this mean? Dread glory as you dread shame? Glory comes from below. Obtain it, you are afraid of shame. Lose it, you are still afraid of shame. That is why it is said, dread glory as you dread shame. What does this mean? Prize great calamity as you prize your own body. We who meet with great calamities meet them because we have a body. If we had not a body, what calamity could reach us? Therefore he who honors the kingdom as his body can govern the kingdom. He who loves the kingdom as his own body can be trusted with the kingdom. Yeah, this whole book is so beautiful. And I think it tessellates very well with the Christian faith also, because it puts such an emphasis on love at various times. And one other thing I want to point out here is where it says, what does this mean? Dread glory as you dread shame. Glory comes from below. To be glorified means to be raised to glory. You can't be born in that condition in the eyes of the society. You need to be raised there. And anything that is raised will come back down, at the very least through death or through disappearance through, erasure in historical knowledge. Even if your glory carries on after you die, eventually all will be wiped clean. All right, so let's move on to 14. Yeah, this is just such a great book, and it's a good reminder that there is so much to learn about life, and that if we, it makes me never want to be distracted with material things or with gossip or with things that don't matter. It really always encourages me to return to myself and to return to the work that I can do in this life. And I think that that's beautiful. And I'm very, very grateful that I have access to this literature. So let's do 14, Jia Fu Feng. Look, it cannot be seen. It is beyond form. Listen, it cannot be heard. It is beyond sound. Grasp, it cannot be held. It is intangible. These three are indefinable, therefore they are joined in one. From above it is not bright, from below it is not dark. An unbroken thread beyond description, it returns to nothingness, the form of the formless, the image of the imageless. It is called indefinable and beyond imagination. Stand before it and there is no beginning, follow it and there is no end. Stay with the ancient Tao, move with the present. Knowing the ancient beginning is the essence of Tao. I'll go back to my pen example for this one, because that's what I think of when it says an unbroken thread beyond description. That's what I'm describing with the history of the pen. We just call it a pen. We call it the pen because it's the pen that I'm holding. However, if we trace back its history the way that I did, it is indefinable. We can't. It is immediately too complex to ever describe in language or to name. So similarly, yeah, it is called indefinable and beyond imagination. Stand before it and there is no beginning, and follow it and there is no end. That has to do with all existence. Everything is the Tao and everything follows the Tao, even things like this pen, and you can use it as a simple example. And also, the very beginning of this, grasp, it cannot be held. I'm grasping it, or I'm grasping the pen. And what I recommend actually literally grasping things, seeing things, hearing things, and reflecting on that when you're reading this verse, because it just makes it real. It's easy to read things and have them be abstract. This book is so far from abstract. This book is about overcoming abstraction. It's about I wonder if it's about overcoming. It's about dissolving abstraction and re-entering into life. So, yeah, grasp, it cannot be held. Listen, it cannot be heard. Look, it cannot be seen. Really try to look for it and really think about what you're looking for in those moments. Really try to listen for it and then reflect on, well, what am I really trying to listen for? It's beyond sound. So, yeah, let's keep moving over to Isabella Mears' version of this one. Looking at it, you do not see it. You call it invisible. Listening to it, you do not hear it. You call it inaudible. Touching it, you do not grasp it. You call it intangible. These three cannot be described, but they blend and are one. Above it is not bright. Below it is not dim. Unceasingly, it cannot be called by a name. It enters into form and returns into spirit. That is why it is called spiritual form of form, spiritual image of image. That is why it is called vague and indeterminate. Meet it, you cannot see its beginning. Follow it, you cannot see its end. Consider the Tao of old in order to arrange affairs of now. To be able to know the life spring of old is to give expression to the thread of the Tao. And she has a note here that I'll read. The three qualities, invisible, inaudible, and intangible, were considered by Jesuit priests, and notably by Abel Remusant, 1823 AD, to be equivalent to the Hebrew have. I don't know what that word is. Well, I guess I do because she just defined it in terms of the other words, but that they have in them an attempt of the human mind to know and describe the unknowable is evidenced in this beautiful poem of Francis Thompson, which begins thus. O world invisible, we view thee. O world intangible, we touch thee. O world unknowable, we know thee. Inapprehensible, we clutch thee. One could almost imagine that Francis Thompson had known and loved this chapter of Lao Tzu when he proceeds in the same poem to say, "But when so sad thou canst not sadder, cry, and upon thy so sore loss shall shine the traffic of Jacob's ladder pitched betwixt heaven and Charing Cross." Sharing Cross? It's not Charing. There's only one R. Apologies. So, but when so sad thou canst not sadder, cry, and upon thy so sore loss shall shine the traffic of Jacob's ladder pitched betwixt heaven and Charing Cross. Yea, in the night, my soul, my daughter, cry, clinging heaven by the hems, and lo, Christ walking on the water, not of Gennesareth, but of Thames. Truly, he considered well the Tao of old and knew how to apply it to affairs of now. That line, considered the Tao of old in order to arrange affairs of now. That's something we all have to be doing. That's why I read this book. I think it's very valuable for living in our times. So let's keep it moving to 15. In Jia Fu Feng. All right. Oh, I like these ones. Or I like the translations of 15. The ancient masters were subtle, mysterious, profound, responsive. The depth of their knowledge is unfathomable. Because it is unfathomable, all we can do is describe their appearance. Watchful, like men crossing a winter stream. Alert, like men aware of danger. Courteous, like visiting guests. Yielding, like ice about to melt. Simple, like uncarved blocks of wood. Hollow, like caves. Opaque, like muddy pools. Who can wait quietly while the mud settles? Who can remain still until the moment of action? Observers of the Tao do not seek fulfillment. Not seeking fulfillment, they are not swayed by desire for change. And I will read the translations from all three books for this one. Isabella Mears is a little bit different. It's a little darker. So, or it seems a little darker on the surface at least. Of old, those who were leaders in good actions examined mysteries with deep penetration. Searching deeply, they did not understand. Even masters did not understand. Therefore, their actions were void of strength. They were timid, as those who cross a torrent in winter. Irresolute as those who fear their neighbors, grave as strangers before their host. They effaced themselves as ice that melts. They were rough as undressed wood, empty as a valley, confused as troubled water. Who is able by quietness to make pure the troubled heart? Who is able by repose to become conscious of inner life? He who safely maintains his consciousness of life will find it to be inexhaustible. Even a master will find it to be inexhaustible. Therefore, he will be able, though not faultless, to renew perfectness. Yet, the second half of this one is just so great and highly relevant because we are not encouraged to quietness by our culture, but the access is always there. And if we maintain our consciousness of life, that is so inexhaustible compared to running around with all of the material or media that is available in our culture. Those things all die away, and those things just bring agitation. They only agitate the soul. And to fast from them, to separate yourself from them and build a different culture that is grounded in life itself and in your soul itself, that is a source of inexhaustible wonder and interest and endless activity, ironically, because who is able by repose to become conscious of inner life. But by that repose, you enter into the ultimate activity of life, which is to be aligned with the Tao. So I will also read my first full verse from Brooke in this video, because I recall it being interesting for this one. Like I said, he tends to be a little more poetic. All right. The ancient adepts of the course, a mystery so subtle were they, a pervasiveness so obscure that none could really know them. Precisely because unknowable, we make tentative descriptions of their many seemings, ready for anything, as if crossing a frozen stream in winter, tentative and unsure, as if fearing their neighbors on all four sides, serious and respectful, like strangers who are only passing through, pliant and fragile, like ice just about to melt, solid and weighty, like raw blocks of unhewn wood, broad and open, like empty mountain valleys, muddled and mixed, like pools of muddy water. Does anyone still know how to be muddy like that, so muddy that through stillness all slowly comes clear? Does anyone still know how to be settled like that, so settled that through long waiting, fresh motion slowly emerges? Those who keep to this course desire no fullness. Just by remaining unfilled, they are well and truly covered, for their cover takes no finished shape. All right, I'll move on to 16 here. Let's see. And in Jia Fu Feng, we've got this is also like one of the all-time best ones in the book. So, empty yourself of everything. Let the mind become still. The 10,000 things rise and fall while the self watches their return. They grow and flourish and then return to the source. Returning to the source is stillness, which is the way of nature. The way of nature is unchanging. Knowing constancy is insight. Not knowing constancy leads to disaster. Knowing constancy, the mind is open. With an open mind, you will be open-hearted. Being open-hearted, you will act royally. Being royal, you will attain the divine. Being divine, you will be at one with the Tao. Being at one with the Tao is eternal, and though the body dies, the Tao will never pass away. I just want to draw attention to, well, two things. I mean, empty yourself of everything, let the mind become still. The 10,000 things rise and fall while the self watches their return. The 10,000 things, that's the material world. That is the, maybe even just the perceptible world in general. So the other part, knowing constancy is insight. I think when I think of constancy, I think of collectedness. I think of concentration sustained through time. I think, and that is dependent on honing attention and building up strength in attention. So when you actually know constancy, I don't know constancy. I would love to. I'm kind of hoping I get there at some point. But knowing constancy is to flow naturally with all of the thoughts that enter in and out and the perceptions that enter in and out, but to move with the Tao. And it's not to be at the whim of your thoughts. It's to have your psyche be at your whim, more so, or at the whim of the Tao. So I will read that in Isabella Mears' copy. If you want to like the video, I appreciate it. If you want to subscribe, hit the bell, tell your friends. I'm live multiple times a week and not always reading. Typically, I will kind of do a monologue on something random that has to do with our society, but sometimes I just want to read. I think it'll probably be like 50-50 so that I can give myself some rest. So let me move here. Nice to see you in the chat. Kelp maxing. It's true, I am thirsty. All right, so 16. To arrive at ultimate quietness, steadfastly maintain repose. All creatures together have form. I see them return again to their root. The master creatures come to perfect form. Continuously they return to their root. Continuous return to the root is called repose. Repose is called the law of return. The law of return is called eternity. To know eternity is called illumination. To ignore eternity is to draw misfortune on oneself. To know eternity is to be great of soul. To be great of soul is to be a ruler. To be a ruler is to be greater than all. To be greater than all is to be conscious of life. To be conscious of life is to endure. The body shall disappear, but not decay. Yeah, again, I just love this book. So the repose is called the law of return. That is often what I describe when I think of my experiences with using phones and being distracted, or getting caught up in media, or getting caught up in really anything. I want to return to myself. I want to return to myself and find who I am without those distractions, because those distractions mold me, and in turn I draw misfortune on myself, as it puts it here. So yeah, and I would rather just be conscious of life and endure. So let's move along here to 17. Yeah, not much to say about this one, I don't think. 17. The very highest is barely known. Then comes that which people know and love. Then that which is feared. Then that which is despised. Who does not trust enough will not be trusted. When actions are performed without unnecessary speech, people say, "We did it." That is something I think about when doing group activities or embarking on a long-term project or something. I try to avoid unnecessary speech when I can, but that is hard. For someone like me who decided that I should talk to myself alone in my room for hours at a time in a week just to not be going crazy. So the other line I want to draw attention to here that I like is, I'll add a pronoun. He who does not trust enough will not be trusted. That is something you see a lot in the world. So yeah, 17 from Isabella Mears. Wait, is this the same one? Seems a little... yeah, I guess so. Or... Oh, shit, was I... no, it's a... Huh. I guess, okay, well, the other thing about the Tao Te Ching is that sometimes the verses will be different in different books, because there are different source material scrolls that have things in different orders. So I think that this is not the same verse, although there is something. Yeah, no, I mean, I guess it. No, it is. Sorry, it just she puts it quite differently, so I was like, am I even reading the right one right now? So from Isabella Mears, in ancient times, the people knew that they had rulers. Then they loved and praised them. Then they feared them. Then they despised them. The rulers did not trust the people. The people did not trust the rulers. The rulers were grave. Their words were precious. The people, having finished their work and brought it to a successful issue, said, "We are sufficient in ourselves." So I'll move on to the final stretch here. 18, 19, and 20. They're all a bit related. And I will read 20 from Brooks' book as well. So 18. When the great Tao is forgotten, kindness and morality arise. When wisdom and intelligence are born, the great pretense begins. When there is no peace within the family, filial piety and devotion arise. When the country is confused and in chaos, loyal ministers appear. This harkens back to how I started the stream with the naming of things, with the abstraction of things, because I think kindness and morality here are referring to an abstract form of kindness and morality that is imposed by the norms of the society. So great Tao is forgotten, and you have to instead impose a convention. So it can be it seems a little paradoxical, because it's like, well, don't we want kindness? Don't we want morality? But I think that's what it's referring to. So from Isabella, great Tao lost, there came duty to man and right conduct. Wisdom and shrewdness appearing, there came great hypocrisy. The 6 relationships inharmonious, there came filial piety deep, deep in the heart. Kingdoms, families, and clans at war, there came loyal ministers. And she says, the 6 relationships are those of father and son, elder brother and younger brother, husband and wife. So I'll move along here to 19. And yeah, these last two are good. Give up sainthood, renounce wisdom, and it will be 100 times better for everyone. Give up kindness, renounce morality, and men will rediscover filial piety and love. Give up ingenuity, renounce profit, and bandits and thieves will disappear. These three are outward forms alone. They are not sufficient in themselves. It is more important to see the simplicity, to realize one's true nature, to cast off selfishness and temper desire. Similar thing there with the give up sainthood and renounce wisdom. I kind of, we're approaching this point in the book where I think of going over a hill, sort of where we're born in an unnatural culture, in a very it's an anti-Tao culture, anti-God culture. It's a hateful world. So we're born in this circumstance where we are not naturally adapted to be in tune with existence. And in a way, you have to start going up this hill of learning things and of making sense and of piecing it all back together, reading books, developing your wisdom, developing your intelligence, and finding ways to heal certain wounds that have been imposed on you earlier in your life. This whole process I think of as going up a hill. But then you reach a point where you're able to start going down the hill. And this is something I've only been really thinking about recently, but yeah, so give up sainthood, renounce wisdom, give up kindness, renounce morality. You can get rid of the labels or the laws that you've been learning, and instead you are just purely in touch with existence. You're purely in touch with the Tao, you're in touch with your being, and you don't need to overthink it, you don't need to abstract it. Instead, you can just live it, and you are living pure life. So that's how I think about that. I'll read it from Isabella Mears here. 19. If the people renounce self-control and reject wisdom, let them gain simplicity and purity. If the people renounce duty to man and reject right conduct, let them return to filial piety deep, deep in the heart. If they renounce skill and leave off search for profit, let them rob and by violence take possession of spiritual life. These three things do not help our progress. Therefore now let us seek to perceive simplicity, to conserve beauty in the heart, to curb selfishness, and to have few desires. To be real, until the very ends there, I don't really, I don't totally parse some of this one, but the end is nice. So let's move along to the last one here, which is verse 20. And that'll be that. So this is another banger. And it's in line, these three kind of go together. And I'll read a note from the back of this one from Jacob Needleman, who commented, or he wrote the notes in the introduction to the Jia Fu Feng version. And I recommend his introduction and his notes. So, all right, 20. This really fits with the hill picture that I just drew, where you go up the hill and you're learning and you are making sense, and then ultimately you can start descending the hill in pure simplicity and pureness of heart, and then you can just be living. So give up learning and put an end to your troubles. Is there a difference between yes and no? Is there a difference between good and evil? Must I fear what others fear? What nonsense! Other people are contented, enjoying the sacrificial feast of the ox. In spring, some go to the park and climb the terrace, but I alone am drifting, not knowing where I am. Like a newborn babe before it learns to smile, I am alone, without a place to go. Others have more than they need, but I alone have nothing. I am a fool, oh yes, I am confused. Others are clear and bright, but I alone am dim and weak. Others are sharp and clever, but I alone am dull and stupid. Oh, I drift like the waves of the sea, without direction, like the restless wind. Everyone else is busy, but I alone am aimless and depressed. I am different. I am nourished by the Great Mother. And I think in a later version of this, they use a different word instead of depressed, because I didn't remember that last time. But anyway, so now I'll read the note from Jacob Needleman on 18, 19, and 20 taken together. These chapters affirm the primacy of being at one with the Tao, rather than thinking about it as an ideal. Lao Tzu warns us that the concepts of virtue, ideals of wisdom and morality, and all the precepts that are intended to lead us toward the good all too easily make us forget the main thing, which is to open within ourselves to that radiant energy whose action upon us will conform our lives to the Tao. Consider St. Augustine's, "Love God and do what you will," and the spontaneous arising of compassion along the way of the I read this all the time, I've never said it out loud, Bodhisattva, the spontaneous arising of compassion along the way of the Bodhisattva in Mahayana Buddhism. Morality is often only the imposition of one part of ourselves, the mind, upon the other parts, which remain, as it were, unconvinced and fundamentally untouched. This does not mean that the seeker of the way foolishly abandons moral rules, but that at a certain point, he sees that external morality without internal morality can be a kind of tyranny over others and over the living forces within oneself. So that's when you start descending the hill. And the way towards this inner morality may seem startlingly or even shockingly opposed to quote-unquote morality. For example, give up sainthood, renounce wisdom. Again, it must be kept in mind that blindly going against conventional morality is as fruitless as blindly obeying convention. And I will read this from Isabella Mears. And she has a nice note as well. Renounce learning. It brings loss to the inner life. How slight the difference between yes and yea. How great the difference between good and evil. That which men fear is indeed to be feared. When men give themselves up to disorder, it never stops. Many men rejoice and rejoice over a supply of good food, over being in a high and exalted position. I am calm. I do not feel the slightest emotion, like a newborn child which cannot yet smile at its mother, without attachment to anything, returning always to the inner life. Many men have superfluous possessions. I have nothing that I value. I desire that my heart be completely subdued, emptied to emptiness. Men of wealth are in the daylight of prosperity. I am in the dark. Men of wealth are endowed with penetration. I appear confused and ignorant. Suddenly I am, as it were, on a vast sea, floating on the sea of inner life, which is boundless. Many men are full of ability. I appear to be stupid and rustic. Thus I am different from other men, but I revere the Mother, sustainer of all beings. And she has a note here. A brief commentary on this chapter is found in the words of St. Paul. I count all things but loss, that I may win Christ and be found in him. Unquote. For the inner life is the Christ life and none else. Again, the mystic poet Francis Thompson, in the Mistress of Vision, says, Pierce thy heart to find the key. When thy seeing blindeth thee to what thy fellow mortals see, when their sight to thee is sightless, their living, death, their light most lightless, search no more, pass the gates of Luthany, tread the region Eleanor. So yeah, that's a beautiful poem. I don't know who Francis Thompson is, but worth checking out, I guess. And yeah, and to people who have asked, at least one commenter was asking me directly about my comparative religious studies versus now committing to Catholicism, and I think that puts it well. Or I wrote like a semi-long comment response to them explaining a little bit of it. And yeah, the inner life is the Christ life and none else. So there's a lot of parallel there, and I've found a richness in the Catholic tradition that I haven't seen anywhere else. So she also says, it is most true that those who dare to pierce their heart to find the key find also that they have gained entrance into the land of harmony, to the region where God speaks inwardly, where they have new eyes, new values of life, new measurements of gain and loss. And that's That's what we're doing in the Junto. We're piercing our hearts. We are reclaiming the inner life. We are, that's what I think this show is about. That's where I'm trying to go. So I'll read one more, and this is Brooke Ziporian's version of this, and I like his translation of this one. There's a breastfeeding reference at the end that I might just laugh because I'm reading it on stream on the internet to be immortalized, but it's it's something like and I'm feeding at the breast of the mother or something. Yeah, so I alone, unlike the others. So anyway, verse 20 from Brooke. And here we go. Cut off study, the emulation of others, and all worries will cease. What is the distance between a yes, sir, and a yeah, sure? What is the distance between good and bad? But, they say, what other people respect, you cannot afford not to respect. How absurd, how far off point. For the mass of people are so happy and cheerful, as if enjoying a great festival, as if strolling the terraces in the springtime. I alone seem nervous and circumspect, unclear about which way to go, like a clueless newborn not yet able to smile, all torpid and slack, as if belonging nowhere. The mass of people all have more than enough. I alone seem lost and abandoned. My mind, the mind of an idiot. A mass of muddle, this mind of mine. The ordinary folks are so bright and lucid. I alone seem to be so dark and so dim. They are so precise and clear. I alone am confused and bewildered, drifting around on what seems an ocean, blown along as if utterly unmoored. The mass of other people, they act with such purpose. I alone am a thing so dense and inert, so base and so low. I alone, unlike the others, see no value in anything but feeding at the breast of the mother. And that's the mother of all things. That's the Tao. So, I think that one's great, because that one really makes me think of, the people I see out in the world, the consumers out there. So, the mass of people are so happy and cheerful, as if enjoying a great festival. Meanwhile, we're in World War III and everyone's having their brains destroyed by cell phones. So, yeah, I think So, all right, thanks for tuning in. I will not be doing a show Wednesday, but I will do a show Thursday and Friday. Then I'm planning to take Holy Week off. So, yeah, let's get this out of here. All right, appreciate you all for tuning in. Subscribe, share it with a friend if you appreciate it. Leave a comment. All that stuff, I appreciate it. So, yeah, and maybe we broke 400. Let me check if I broke 400 subscribers on this stream or if we got nobody. Let's check. All right, we're at 400. So, we made it. All right, have a good night, everybody.